Imagine a map of the Atlantic Ocean, sometime around 1635. On the western coast of France sits a tiny fishing town called Les Sables d'Olonne, a forgettable place, the kind of town where nothing happens, where boys grow up expecting to inherit their father's poverty and die in the same bed they were born in. Now trace your finger across that map, southwest across thousands of miles of open water, past the Azores, past the Canary Islands, until you reach the Caribbean, a world of turquoise water and volcanic islands. Spanish treasure fleets carrying gold from the New World back to Seville. And nestled off the northwest coast of Hispaniola, a small turtle-shaped island called Tortuga, barely 30 miles long, ringed by cliffs on three sides. This island was about to become the most dangerous place on Earth, and the boy born in that forgettable French fishing town was about to become the most savage pirate who ever lived. His real name was Jean David Now, but nobody remembers that name. History remembers him as François l'Olonnais, the flail of the Spanish, a man so violent, so relentlessly cruel that Spanish sailors would rather drown themselves than surrender to him. A man who ripped a beating heart from the chest of a living prisoner and bit into it like an animal. A man who burned entire cities and tortured hundreds for gold they didn't have. And in the end, a man whose death was every bit as gruesome as the life he lived. This is the story of how a starving French boy crossed an ocean, survived a massacre, terrorized an empire, and met his end at the hands of people who decided to give him exactly what he deserved. Very little is known about the early years of Jean David Now. The historical record is thin, and most of what we know comes from a single source, a book called The Buccaneers of America, written by a Dutch surgeon named Alexandre Exquemelin and published in 1678. Exquemelin was himself an indentured servant in the Caribbean who eventually sailed with pirates. He may have even crossed paths with l'Olonnais on the island of Tortuga during the mid-1660s. What he wrote about the man from Olonne reads less like biography and more like a horror story. What we do know is this. Jean David Now was born sometime between 1,630 and 1,635 inches. Les Sables d'Olonne, a coastal town in the Vendée region of western France. His family was desperately poor. So poor, in fact, that when he was still a teenager, around the age of 15, he was sold into indentured servitude and shipped across the Atlantic to the French colony of Martinique. Indentured servitude in the 17th century Caribbean was, for all practical purposes, a polite word for slavery. You were property. You worked the sugar plantations under the equatorial sun for 3 years, sometimes longer. You were beaten. You were starved. And if you survived your term, you were dumped onto a Caribbean island with nothing but the clothes on your back and told to figure out the rest of your life. The young Jean David served his indenture. Some accounts say in Martinique, others in Hispaniola under Spanish masters. Either way, by around 1660, he was a free man. Free, but with nothing. No money, no trade, no connections. No way back to France. And this is where the map of his life takes its decisive turn. Because instead of trying to scrape out an honest living in the colonies, Jean David Now drifted to a place where men with nothing had everything to gain. He went to Tortuga. Now, to understand what Tortuga was in the 1660s, you need to understand the Caribbean at that time. Spain claimed virtually everything: the entire Gulf of Mexico, most of the Caribbean islands, all of Central and South America. Spanish treasure fleets sailed back and forth loaded with gold, silver, emeralds, and spices. The problem was, Spain couldn't defend all of it. The empire was stretched impossibly thin, and into those cracks poured the most dangerous men in the Western Hemisphere. Tortuga, that little turtle-shaped island off the coast of what is now Haiti, had become a haven for men who existed outside the law. If you picture the island on a map, you can see why. High cliffs on 3 sides made it nearly impossible to invade. A single natural harbor on the southern coast was the only way in or out by sea. The jungle interior was thick enough to hide a small army, and its position, just a few miles from the main shipping lanes between Havana and Cartagena, made it the perfect launching point for raids on Spanish vessels passing through the Windward Passage. Originally, it attracted a group of French hunters known as Buccaneers. These were rough, wild men who lived in the jungles of Hispaniola, hunting wild cattle and pigs. They would smoke the meat over a special type of fire called a bucan, which is how they got their name. Over time, the word buccaneer evolved into the English word buccaneer, and the buccaneers evolved from simple hunters into something far more dangerous. By the time Jean-David Nau arrived, Tortuga was a full-blown pirate republic. The French colonial authorities controlled the island through a governor, but they tolerated the buccaneers because they served a useful purpose. Every ship the buccaneers stole from Spain was a ship Spain couldn't use against France. Every coastal town they sacked weakened Spain's grip on the New World. So the governor of Tortuga would hand out letters of marca, essentially government-issued licenses to rob and kill, and point the buccaneers at Spanish targets. Before we go any further, I need to stop for a second, because what I've been showing you in these videos only scratches the surface. And I realized at some point that the full picture, the actual pirate code, word for word, the real punishment records, the exact treasure division shares, the ports that secretly funded them, it doesn't fit in a video. I put it all into one document, the Black Flag Codex. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now, let's keep going. It was state-sponsored piracy, and business was booming. Jean-David Nau threw himself into this world. He joined the Buccaneers, learned the trade, and eventually caught the attention of the governor of Tortuga, a man named Bertrand d'Ogeron. Impressed by the young Frenchman's boldness, d'Ogeron gave him a captured ship and a commission to raid Spanish shipping. From that point on, Jean-David Nau ceased to exist. He took a new name drawn from his hometown, a name that would soon make the Spanish Empire tremble: François l'Olonnais. His early raids were successful but relatively small. He and his crew targeted Spanish merchant vessels in the waters around Hispaniola, seizing cargo and selling it back on Tortuga. But a year or two into his pirating career, everything nearly ended before it truly began. L'Olonnais was sailing near the Yucatan Peninsula when his ship was wrecked off the coast of Campeche, Mexico. It was a disaster. The crew managed to get ashore, but they were stranded in hostile territory. Spanish soldiers patrolling the coast found them almost immediately. What followed was a massacre. The Spaniards attacked the shipwrecked pirates and killed nearly every single one of them. Bodies piled on the beach, blood soaked into the sand. But l'Olonnais was not among the dead. He was wounded, possibly badly, but still alive. And in that moment, he made a decision that tells you everything about the kind of man he was. He smeared himself with the blood of his dead crewmates. He covered his body with sand. And he lay perfectly still among the corpses, pretending to be dead, while Spanish soldiers walked among the bodies, finishing off survivors. He didn't move. He barely breathed. And the Spaniards, satisfied that every pirate on that beach was dead, left. After the soldiers were gone, l'Olonnais dragged himself out from under the bodies. With the help of a few escaped slaves he found near the coast, he disguised himself as a Spaniard and made his way to the nearby city of Campeche. From there, he gathered a small crew of escaped slaves and fellow castaways, stole a canoe, and somehow made it back to Tortuga. The Spanish authorities, meanwhile, celebrated. They believed l'Olonnais was dead. They were wrong, and that mistake would cost them dearly. Back on Tortuga, l'Olonnais wasted no time. He gathered a new crew and resumed raiding, but something had changed. The massacre at Campeche had done something to him. Whether it ignited a hatred that was always simmering beneath the surface, or whether it simply removed whatever restraint he had left, the man who returned to piracy after Campeche was a fundamentally different creature from the one who had left. One of his first acts after his return was to capture a Spanish town and hold it hostage, demanding a ransom. The governor of Havana, a man named Francisco Obregón y Gascón dispatched a warship to destroy Lolognais and his pirates once and for all. The governor even sent a hangman aboard the ship, expecting that Lolognais would be captured, tried briefly, and executed on the spot. It did not go according to plan. Lolognais captured the ship. He rounded up the entire Spanish crew, and then, one by one, he beheaded every single soldier on board. Every last one, except for one man. That one man, Lolognais spared. He spared him specifically so that he could deliver a message back to the governor of Havana. The message was simple and chilling. Lolognais declared that from that day forward, he would never give quarter to any Spaniard, ever, under any circumstances. He kept that promise. Word spread quickly through the Caribbean. The Spanish already feared the Buccaneers, but Lolognais was something else entirely. Other pirates captured ships, took prisoners, and collected ransoms. Lolognais captured ships, killed everyone aboard, and kept killing even after there was no tactical reason to do so. Spanish sailors and soldiers began to understand that surrendering to Lolognais was not an option. If you saw his flag on the horizon, you either fought to the death or you jumped overboard and took your chances with the sharks. Both were better than what happened if he got his hands on you. And what he had planned next would prove exactly why they were right to be terrified. In 1666, Lolognais assembled his masterpiece. He gathered a fleet of 8 ships and a crew of 440 hardened buccaneers. His destination was Maracaibo, a wealthy Spanish colonial city located on the strait connecting Lake Maracaibo to the Gulf of Venezuela in what is now the northwestern coast of the country. Joining forces with fellow buccaneer Michel Le Bosque, Lolognais sailed south from Tortuga with one of the largest pirate fleets the Caribbean had ever seen. Now, if you trace this journey on a map, you can see the ambition of the plan. Tortuga sits off the northern coast of Hispaniola, in the middle of the Caribbean. Maracaibo is roughly 1,000 miles to the south, deep inside Venezuelan waters, tucked behind a narrow strait that connects the Gulf of Venezuela to the massive inland body of water known as Lake Maracaibo. To reach the city, you had to sail south through open Caribbean waters, navigate the Venezuelan coastline, enter the Gulf, and then squeeze through a bottleneck strait guarded by a fortress. It was one of the most defensible positions in the entire Spanish colonial empire. This was not a quick raid, this was an invasion. And along the way, Lolognais got lucky. His fleet intercepted a Spanish treasure ship. They captured it, and when they opened the holds, they found a cargo of cocoa beans, gemstones, and more than 260,000 Spanish dollars. It was a fortune. Most pirates would have turned around and sailed home rich men. Lolognais kept going. When the fleet finally arrived at the entrance to Lake Maracaibo, they found the city's primary defense, the San Carlos de la Barra fortress. 16 heavy cannon pointed out across the water, ready to blast any invading fleet to pieces. The fortress was considered impregnable. No naval force in its right mind would try to sail past those guns. Lolognais didn't try to sail past them. Instead, he landed his men on the coast and approached the fortress from the landward side, which was completely undefended. Nobody had ever thought to attack from the land, because nobody had ever been bold enough or crazy enough to try. Lolognais took the fortress in a matter of hours. With the fort in their hands, the pirates dismantled the walls and spiked the cannons to ensure they couldn't be turned against them during a retreat. Then they marched into Maracaibo itself. But the city was mostly empty. The residents had seen the pirate fleet approaching and fled into the surrounding countryside, taking their valuables with them. The pirates found abandoned houses, empty storerooms, and locked churches. For most raiders, this would have been the end of the story. The city was empty. There was nothing to take. Lolognais was not most raiders. He sent his men into the jungle and the surrounding villages to track down the fleeing residents. Over the next 2 months, the pirates hunted the people of Maracaibo through the countryside like animals. When they caught them, they tortured them. Lolognais was a specialist in this. Stop for a second. What you just heard about the pirate code is the part that rewrites everything you thought you knew. But it only lands when you see the actual shares, the exact fractions written into the Articles of Agreement, the punishments, the port records, the names of the men who funded them from government offices. It's all in the Black Flag Codex, linked in the description. 5 seconds. Grab it now, because what comes next builds directly on it. Link is below. QR code is on your screen. According to Exquemelin's account, his methods were systematic and horrifying. He would slice portions of flesh from his victims with a cutlass, starting small and cutting progressively larger pieces. He burned captives alive with torches to force them to reveal where they had hidden their gold. He practiced a technique called wolding, where a knotted rope would be tied around a prisoner's head and then slowly twisted with a stick until the pressure became so great that the victim's eyes were forced out of their skull. He cut out tongues. He severed limbs while people were still alive and conscious. And he kept going. For 2 months, the pirates occupied Maracaibo, extracting every ounce of wealth from its people. And when there was nothing left to take, they set fire to much of the city. Then they moved south across Lake Maracaibo to the town of San Antonio de Gibraltar on the eastern shore. Gibraltar was wealthier than Maracaibo and had a proper military garrison. The soldiers outnumbered the pirates significantly. It should have been a slaughter. It was a slaughter, just not the kind anyone expected. Lolones and his buccaneers attacked the garrison and killed 500 Spanish soldiers. 500. The pirates took the city and did exactly what they had done in Maracaibo. They demanded a ransom of 20,000 pieces of 800 and 500 head of cattle. The terrified citizens paid it. And then, even after the ransom was paid, Lolones continued to ransack the city. He took everything. When the final accounting was done, the pirates had amassed a total haul of 260,000 pieces of 8, along with gemstones, silverware, silk, and a number of enslaved people. The damage Lolones inflicted on Gibraltar was so catastrophic that the city, formerly a major hub for the export of cacao, had nearly ceased to exist by 1680. When word of the Maracaibo and Gibraltar raids reached Tortuga, Lolones became the most famous and the most feared pirate in the Caribbean. The Spanish gave him a nickname that has echoed through history. They called him the Flail des Espagnols, the flail of the Spanish. The name was not given out of respect. It was given out of raw, visceral terror. Spanish colonial governors sent urgent dispatches back to Madrid, warning that a French demon was loose in the Caribbean and that the empire's grip on its richest colonies was slipping. Coastal towns doubled their garrisons. Ship captains altered their routes, adding weeks to their journeys just to avoid the waters where Lolones was known to hunt. For the first time, Spain was genuinely afraid of a single pirate, and his legend was about to attract an even bigger army. Fresh off the plunder of Maracaibo, Lolones began assembling his next expedition. This time, 700 pirates volunteered to sail with him. 700. For context, most pirate crews in the Caribbean numbered between 50 and 150. Lolones was now commanding what was essentially a small naval fleet. His target this time was the Central American mainland, specifically the coast of Honduras and the rumored gold mines near the inland city of San Pedro. In 1667, the fleet sailed for Honduras. They struck first at Puerto Cavallo, a coastal settlement that they overwhelmed and looted with relative ease. But Lolones was after bigger game. He wanted the gold of San Pedro. To get there, he had to march his men inland through dense jungle, and the Spanish were waiting. A large force of Spanish soldiers ambushed the Buccaneers in the jungle. The fighting was brutal. Many of the pirates were killed. Lolones himself barely escaped with his life. In the chaos of the ambush, his men managed to capture 2 Spanish soldiers. What happened next is the single most infamous moment in the entire history of Caribbean piracy. Lolones needed to know if there was a safe route to San Pedro, one that avoided further ambushes. He questioned the 2 captured Spaniards. They refused to talk. So Lolones drew his cutlass, walked up to one of the prisoners and cut open the man's chest. He reached inside with his bare hands, pulled out the man's still-beating heart, and bit into it. He gnawed at it, Exquemelin wrote, like a ravenous wolf. Then he turned to the second prisoner and told him, simply and calmly, that he would do the same thing to him if he didn't show him a different route to San Pedro. The second prisoner talked, but when Lolañas finally reached San Pedro, the city was a disappointment. There was no vast treasure, no rivers of gold. The mines were not what he had hoped for. In a rage, he razed the town to the ground and retreated back toward the coast. And here is where Lolañas' story begins its long, ugly decline. After the failure at San Pedro, the pirate fleet began to fracture. Many of the 700 men who had eagerly signed up to sail with the legendary flail of the Spanish began to lose faith. The Maracaibo haul had been enormous, but the Honduras campaign was proving to be a disaster. Supplies were low, casualties were high, and the promised treasure had not materialized. The Buccaneers had signed on for plunder, not for trudging through mosquito-infested jungle getting ambushed by Spanish soldiers. They had watched Lolañas rip a man's heart out with his bare hands, and for the first time, some of them looked at their captain and wondered if following a madman into the jungle was really the best career decision they had ever made. Crews began to desert. Some Buccaneers sailed back to Tortuga on their own. Others joined different captains. Michel Lebasque, who had been Lolañas' most reliable ally since Maracaibo, is believed to have parted ways with him during this period as well. Lolañas, now with a much reduced force, continued raiding along the coast, hitting small fishing villages and indigenous settlements. But these were desperate acts, not the calculated campaigns of a man at the height of his power. He burned huts and stole canoes from native communities, which earned him something far more dangerous than the hatred of Spain. He earned the hatred of the people who actually lived on the land he was stumbling through. The fleet, or what was left of it, limped along the coast toward Nicaragua. Lolañas reportedly attempted several more raids, including operations near Campeche, San Pedro Sula, and Guatemala. He tried to push inland into Nicaragua using the Rio Grande de Matagalpa. Each attempt failed. His forces were dwindling. His ships were in disrepair. The jungle itself was killing his men through disease and starvation. At some point, Lolañas' flagship ran aground on a shoal near the Pearl Keys, a small island chain off the coast of Nicaragua. The ship could not be freed. So his remaining crew, now a shadow of the mighty force that had left Tortuga, dismantled the grounded vessel and used the timber to build a smaller boat. They sailed this makeshift craft along the coast, looking for food, looking for anything. Eventually, they made landfall on the coast of the Darien region, in what is today the eastern part of Panama. And this is where François Lolañas, the man who had terrorized an empire, the man who had ripped hearts from living chests and burned cities to the ground, met his end. The Darien was home to the Kuna people, an indigenous group who had every reason to despise the Europeans who had been plundering their lands for more than a century. Lolañas and his starving, ragged crew stumbled into Kuna territory, expecting perhaps to take what they needed by force, as they had always done. But the Kuna were not frightened Spanish colonists hiding their gold. They were warriors on their own land, in their own jungle, and they had had enough. The Kuna captured Lolañas and his remaining men. According to Exquemelin, and corroborated by later accounts, what they did to him was every bit as brutal as anything Lolañas had ever done to his own victims. They tore him apart, limb by limb. They threw each piece of his body into a fire while he was still alive. And when the fire had consumed everything, they scattered his ashes to the wind. Exquemelin wrote that they did this so that, in his words, no trace nor memory might remain of such an infamous, inhuman creature. One of the Buccaneers reportedly survived captivity with the Kuna and was later able to bear witness to what had happened. His account confirmed the worst. François Lolañas, the flail of the Spanish, was gone. Not just dead, erased. He was somewhere between 33 and 38 years old. The career of François l'Olonnais lasted roughly 7 or 8 years. In that time, he managed to inflict more damage on the Spanish colonial empire than almost any other individual pirate in history. He sacked cities that were considered impregnable. He commanded fleets that rivaled small navies. He amassed fortunes that most men couldn't spend in 10 lifetimes. And he did it all through a combination of tactical brilliance, reckless courage, and a capacity for cruelty that is almost impossible to comprehend. But here is the part that most retellings of l'Olonnais' story tend to skip over, and it is the part that matters most. L'Olonnais existed within a system. He didn't emerge from a vacuum. The Caribbean in the 1660s was a theater of imperial warfare, and the Buccaneers were instruments of that warfare. The governor of Tortuga gave l'Olonnais his first ship. French colonial authorities issued the letters of marque that made his raids technically legal. France and Spain were at war, and the Buccaneers were France's unofficial navy in the New World. L'Olonnais was a monster, absolutely, but he was a monster that the French colonial government created, armed, and pointed at its enemies. The same system that produced l'Olonnais also produced Henry Morgan, who sacked Panama City a few years later with 2,000 men. It produced Roque Brasiliano, who was known for roasting Spanish farmers alive on wooden spits. It produced men like Michel Le Basque, who sailed alongside l'Olonnais at Maracaibo and matched him in brutality, if not in fame. The Caribbean was swimming with violence, and l'Olonnais was simply the one who swam the deepest. Exquemelin's account of l'Olonnais, while the primary historical source, should also be taken with some caution. The Buccaneers of America was a bestseller in its time, translated into English, French, Spanish, and German. It was designed to shock and entertain as much as to inform. Exquemelin may have embellished certain details for dramatic effect. The story of the heart-eating, for example, could be exaggerated, though it appears in every edition of the text, and no contemporary source disputes it. What is not in dispute is that l'Olonnais was extraordinarily violent, even by the extreme standards of his time and his profession. His legacy in popular culture is less well known than pirates like Blackbeard or Henry Morgan, but it is nonetheless present. The Japanese manga and anime series One Piece, one of the best-selling comic series in history, drew directly from l'Olonnais. The character Roronoa Zoro takes his name from a Japanese transliteration of l'Olonnais' name. The swordsman Dracul Mihawk's appearance is believed to be modeled on the 1,684 portrait of l'Olonnais that accompanied Exquemelin's book. His exploits may have also inspired the Errol Flynn character Geoffrey Thorpe in the classic film The Seahawk. But the most important legacy of François l'Olonnais is not in fiction. It is in the history of the Caribbean itself. The raids on Maracaibo and Gibraltar were so devastating that they reshaped Spanish colonial defense policy. After l'Olonnais, Spain rebuilt its fortifications, strengthened its garrisons, and began hunting buccaneers with far more intensity. The age of the Buccaneers, the era in which a single captain with a few hundred men could challenge the most powerful empire on earth, was already beginning to fade by the time l'Olonnais died in Darien. Within a generation, the Treaty of Madrid in 1670 would officially end English support for buccaneering, and by the early 1700s, the great pirate havens of Tortuga and Port Royal were shadows of their former selves. L'Olonnais never saw any of that. His story ended on a stretch of jungle coast, in the hands of people who had no interest in his reputation, his conquests, or his fury. The Kuna didn't know or care that he was the most feared pirate in the Caribbean. To them, he was just another European invader, one more violent stranger stumbling out of the sea, and they dealt with him accordingly. There is something almost poetic about the way François l'Olonnais died. A man who spent his entire career refusing to show mercy finally encountered people who refused to show mercy to him. A man who tore the hearts from his enemies had his own body torn apart. A man who burned cities to the ground was thrown into a fire himself. He came into the Caribbean as property. A boy sold into servitude, shipped across an ocean, and worked until his bones ached. He left it as ashes scattered to the wind. And between those 2 points, a span of less than a decade of active piracy, he carved a path of destruction across the Spanish Empire that the colonial powers never fully recovered from. Whether you see him as a villain, a victim of his circumstances, or something far more complicated, one thing is beyond debate. In the long, bloody history of piracy, no one, not Blackbeard, not Henry Morgan, not Bartholomew Roberts, matched the sheer, relentless savagery of the boy from Les Sables d'Olonne who crossed the ocean with nothing and burned an empire to the ground with his bare hands. His ashes are long gone, scattered across a Panamanian jungle 4 centuries ago, but his name, the name he took from that little French fishing town, survived everything. François l'Olonnais, the flail of the Spanish, the most savage pirate who ever lived.